We're going to start recording. I'm going to hand over this presentation to our presenter, Jay. You're also going to hear from, during the Q&A, we have available our panelists, Azalea Mitch, who's our Public Works Director, Sue Ellen Atkinson, our Principal Transportation Planner. We have Robert Bernard, our Deputy Chief at Caltrain, Lori Lowe, who is with Caltrain, the Government and Community Affairs Officer, and Andy Kleber, who's our Project Manager for the 25th Grade Separation Project. My name is Kelly Benz. I do communications for the Public Works. And I'm going to hand it over to Jay now to take our presentation from here. And I'm going to turn my camera off and let him take it over.
Thank you, Kelly. Really appreciate it. And good to see a big showing here. Interested in our Class 1 shared use path. Again, my name is Jay Yu. I am with the City of San Mateo Department of Public Works. I'm the engineer manager. And today I'm going to be going over the background of how we got here. And then we're going to be talking about the design and then ultimately discuss next steps. So first, I want to talk about our guiding principle about bike facilities. So in the city of San Mateo, we have two bicycle master plans. One was developed in 2011, and that plan in 2011 identified a Class 1 facility on 28th Avenue between Delaware and El Camino Real. In 2020, we updated the plan, and we rolled over the Class 1 facility at 28th Avenue from South Delaware to El Camino. Both plans are adopted 2011 and then 2020 as well. And moving forward in regards to building out our bicycle infrastructure and all improvements related to that will be the guiding principle of the 2020 Bicycle Master Plan. Before we go further into the presentation, I want to talk about some terminology, types of bicycle facilities. We probably have a good audience here that are quite familiar with this, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page in terms of the jargon that we will be using throughout the presentation. So first off, to the left, we have a Class 1 facility. And this is the shared use path and is fully separated where bicyclists as well as pedestrians can both use. Then we have a Class 2, which is known as a bike lane. And these are the bike lanes that you'll see where it's exclusive for bicycle usage. You can see this on the right hand of the road most commonly. That you can see and bicyclists can use this. And then there's a Class 3. This is what we call a bike route, and you'll see this, and it's also called the share roads, where bicyclists and vehicles are sharing a vehicle or a lane at that moment. And then lastly, we have a Class 4. This is a separated bike lane. You can see from the photo at the right, this is completely separated from the vehicle flow of traffic, sometimes by delineators, sometimes by planters, or other mechanisms. Next, I want to talk about the grade separation project. As Kelly had mentioned, we have a strong showing here from Caltrain, and we're talking about a city facility, so you might be wondering why, so I want to give some context. As part of the 25th Avenue Grade Separation Project, which is a partnership between Caltrain and the city of San Mateo, they are, as part of the scope, building a Class 1 shared use path on the north side of 28th Avenue. And this project, the 25th Avenue Grade Separation Project, has been in the works for quite some time, all the way at 2005 when planning started, and then planning ended in 2014, and then design started in 2014 to about late 2017, and then construction shortly after that, and we're expected to be completed for this project in 2021. So in the context of the shared use path, it's because it's within the scope of this project that's a joint partnership between the city and Caltrain. So here we are, we're looking at an aerial map of 28th Avenue. And there's a lot going on here. As you can see, this is the aerial map. And I've highlighted 5 zones in this slide to really demonstrate all the bicycle infrastructure that we're installing, have installed, or will in the future in this corridor. And starting at the left, at zone number 1, we have a new bicycle boulevard. And that basically starts at Edison and moves upwards towards the hillside. In zone 2, we have a future project, which is titled the Gap Closure Project, which is about to begin, and that will undergo environmental and design for a future Class 4 as well as design a connection to get bicyclists as well as pedestrians across El Camino in a more efficient manner. And then zone 3 here, which is what we're here to talk about today, is a future class 1 shared use path on the north side. And there is an existing class 3 facility there currently. And then in zone 4, there's an existing class 1 shared use path on the north side. And we're going to look at a potential class 2 facility in the future. And then here at zone 5, there's an existing bicycle boulevard and class 1 shared use path on the north side. So just at a glance here, all the way from Saratoga and past Edison and up to the hillside, there's a lot of bicycle infrastructure that is coming in play. And a lot of that is predicated off of a division of the 2020 Bicycle Master Plan. So next, I want to talk about the 28th Avenue from El Camino to South Delaware. So this is a very complicated corridor because you can notice at the left, this is fronting El Camino. And El Camino, as most would know, and if not, is a state-owned and maintained facility. So a lot of improvements that are adjacent to El Camino would need to get the state's approval ultimately, because there is a state highway there. So their operations are viewed on a microscopic level when we do work with Caltrain. So we have a 3-pronged approach on how we can improve the bicycle infrastructure on 28. First, we installed the class 3 facility as a share roads. And if you look into the screen just a little bit, you can see the share roads and the signage is already there. Step 2, what we're here to talk about today on the immediate term, is the construction of a class 1 shared use path, denoted by the highlight of the green path above. And then lastly is our long-term plan. This is to do a traffic study for feasibility of a class 2 or a class 4 on 28th Avenue. So you could see that orange line at the top. That is where a traffic study will take place in regards to the bicycle facility on this corridor. So just looking at the slide at a glance, again, it is a very complicated roadway because it does abut state right-of-way, and it will take a lot of coordination with the state in order to get the facilities that we want, but the city is committed to doing that in this 3-step approach. So next, I want to talk about the design, what everyone is probably all interested in the class 1 facility here. So before we go into that, I want to, again, show you this aerial view, and I also want to present a cross-section of what we're looking at ultimately when this is built out. So at the top, you'll see an aerial view, and to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a dashed line. That represents the cross-section at the bottom that we're looking at. And at the bottom, we're looking towards El Camino. And starting at the left, we have about a 5.5-foot sidewalk. And I do want to note that this is the most narrowest point on the southern sidewalk. And the reason why there's a pinch point here, because if you go westward, the sidewalk actually opens up anywhere from 10 to 12 feet. But the reason why it's a pinch point at this specific location is because of the existing 5-story office building. They actually abut right up to our right-of-way. And at that point, we have to make a jog because we don't have the right-of-way and they have the retaining wall there. So that is why at the specific section, it does narrow down to 5.5 feet. If we start to move right, you have a 12.5-foot sharrow that goes towards South Delaware, and then a 11-foot drive lane, a 7-foot medium planter there, and then 11 feet drive lane heading towards El Camino, another 12.5-foot sharrows. And then what we're here to talk about today, which is the class 1 shared use path, you can see at the right here, where both pedestrians and bicyclists can use. And again, I just really like this aerial image. I want to talk about some of the connection points in getting to the class 1 facility, because building a facility is one thing, but we want to make sure bicyclists as well as pedestrians can access it. So if you look to the left at call out A, this is a zoomed image of the intersection of El Camino and 28th Avenue. The pink line at the bottom represents the path that bicyclists as well as pedestrians can take to access the Class 1 shared use path. Now, looking at this, there's a couple of things that come to mind. If you're coming from the southern end, you will have to either cross 28th Avenue, and if you're from the southwest corner, you'll have to cross El Camino and 28th. I think we know that this is not the most efficient way to get to the Class 1 path, but there is a plan in the future. As part of the gap closure project, we will analyze and design for a more effective crossing of El Camino and ultimately getting to the Class 1 facility. Unfortunately, it is not part of the 25th Avenue grade separation project, but do know the city has a plan and we're undergoing efforts currently to start the gap closure project, to work with Caltrain to make this intersection as connected as possible to the rest of our bicycle and pedestrian facilities in the corridor, as shown earlier. And if we look to the right, this is call out B. So this is access from South Delaware into the Class 1 shared use path. So everything at the bottom right with the pink, you'll notice, is ways that pedestrian and bicyclists can access it. If you're coming from the east, and you could go ahead and use the existing Class 1 shared use path on the Bay Meadow side, so east of Delaware, and you can continue on to the path. If you're coming from the south, again, you're going to have to cross Delaware and then ultimately cross 28th Avenue. I also want to mention when we are in the future, when we do come and install the Class 2 bicycle facility, connections to improve this intersection will also be analyzed. And again, and I promise for the last time for this slide, we have the aerial image here, and I want to talk about some key design elements that we've incorporated into the Class 1 shared use path to make it as usable as possible. And starting at the left, we have signage. We have signage for ADA. We also have bike route signage to let bicyclists know you can use this path. 2, we have our ped and bike pavement markings. And that's throughout the entire corridor there along the Class 1 shared use path. But this is really to let pedestrians and bicyclists know that you will be sharing this path. So please use it friendly and use it cautiously amongst each other. Next, we have a speed limit sign because, again, we are sharing this path with bicyclists and pedestrians. We want to make sure the speeds are appropriate and as safe as possible. And then lastly, here at the right, we mentioned this prior in other meetings, but we also have acknowledged this during our design, which is the driveway is a point of conflict. There are vehicles that are coming out of this driveway, pedestrians crossing as well as bicyclists. So we've taken every measure to make this as usable and safe as possible. And some of those measures include conflict striping, signage, making sure that vehicles are yielding to pedestrians and bicyclists. And I will touch on this a little bit more. This will be a focal point of a couple of slides. So I'll come back to this. And then there's a centerline delineation for this entire corridor here highlighted in green. This is really to let people know that if you're going east, stay to the right. If you're going west, stay to the left if you're coming from Delaware. And then lastly, on the east end, there's also signage as well. For the most part, these are some of the design elements that are incorporated into the design, but it's sprinkled throughout this entire plan set. And before we talk about the driveway a little bit more, I want to note that our designers have looked at various publications, guidances, technical studies to make sure we're designing the driveway to be as usable as possible. Looked at FHWA, NACDO, Caltrain guidance, as well as other successful implementations. And with that, we have this. So what you're looking at here is a driveway design approach, and this is a render of standing at the Class 1 trail looking at South Delaware. And you can see there are multiple elements sprinkled into this driveway to make it as friendly and usable as possible. One, starting with the driveway ahead markings. You can probably see that right there. And that's really to notify pedestrians and bicyclists that there's a driveway ahead, there's a point of conflict, so use it with caution. Next, we have signage throughout the corridor. RB 15-15B to be specific, but also known as vehicles, please yield to pedestrians and bicyclists because there is a driveway coming in, and if you're going to make a right turn into the driveway, they have the right of way, so please yield. Next, we have our driveway green conflict striping. So this is to let all users know that there is a driveway coming up, but specifically for vehicles to know that there are pedestrians and bicyclists crossing this path. So proceed with caution. Next, and you've seen this before, this is the bike and ped pavement marking to let bicyclists and pedestrians know that you're using this path. And then on the driveway side, so this is into the station, we have stop control for vehicles that are coming out. And this is really to assure vehicles that you're stopping, you're looking both ways. We've installed W1115 signage, which is really to let vehicles know as they're approaching stop intersection there, to yield to pedestrians, to let them know that there are bicyclists and pedestrians crossing, so proceed with caution. And then lastly, there is the center line striping. And again, that's to make sure that bicyclists and pedestrians are using this pathway in a orderly fashion. So just looking at the slide, there are a lot of implementations and a lot of elements that we've incorporated to make this path as safe, as usable as possible. Next, I want to talk about station access. This is directly underneath the above grade tracks, and we're looking at El Camino Real. You can see to the right here, this is the station access ramp. And this is how pedestrians and bicyclists will access that ramp. It's hard to see, but I'm hoping the call out will note it. We are installing look both ways pavement markings. This is predominantly to let bicyclists as well as pedestrians that are coming off the ramp and engaging on the Class 1 shared use path to look both ways. There is a Class 1 facility, so please, before you get out, proceed with caution, and then use the Class 1 shared use path as you see fit. And lastly, of course, no explanation here needed, Class 1 shared use path as denoted. And then this next slide is really a head-on render of the ramp going into the above grade platform. The station access sign is right here. The look both ways pavement marking is right there. And then of course, this is the Class 1 shared use path. I do want to note that Caltrain does recommend, if you can, utilize their bike racks, their bike lockers throughout the facility, because their trains do get pretty impacted at times when we're back to normal at high peak volumes. So space is limited on the rail and train cars. So if you could go ahead and park your bikes at the facility, go ahead and do so. If not, if you want to bring the bike into the train, please dismount before you use the access ramp. That is a request from Caltrain and their normal operating procedure. So a lot going on here. And you might be wondering, okay, there's a lot of projects, Jay, you just went through a lot of different zones. I want to know the timeline. So here we are. Again, the bicycle infrastructure timeline. And again, at the top, you'll see that there are 5 zones, 5 different projects in these zones. And starting at the left here, at zone number 5, at 28th Avenue, the bike boulevard was completed in spring 2021. As we moved towards zone 3, we completed a class 3 Sherrills facility, and this was sometime in June. And then in zone 1, we completed, and this was recent, I actually had to call the project manager to confirm, but we completed the 28th Avenue Bike Boulevard in zone 1. And then in late July, we're anticipating to have the Class 1 shared use path constructed, if we're going according to schedule, over here at zone 3. And then just to note, the grade separation project is expected to be completed in September of 2021. And then in spring of 2022 at zone 3 and 4, the city will undergo a traffic study to analyze 25th Avenue and 28th Avenue, as mentioned earlier, for the construction of a class 2 and a class 4 facility. And then last, sometime in the summer of 2022, we're hoping to have the gap closure project completed in terms of its design, so we can move forward if funding permits to construct either a class 4, or not either, but a class 4 facility and improve the connection on El Camino Real. So again, we could go back to these slides a little bit later, and I believe Kelly will be posting this presentation on the website for your viewing pleasure. But that concludes my presentation. We're going to open it up for questions and answers. Kelly, back to you.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. We have a few questions that came in the registration that didn't really fit this presentation, but we do want to answer them before we move on to the live Q&A. We also want to take a moment to really appreciate our friends at the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition who were helpful in raising the issue to us. Also, some neighborhood members that raised their concerns to us, and we hear you, and we're here today because you raised those concerns to us, and we appreciate the time that the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition took with us as we talked about this meeting and planned for this meeting. So we thank those community partners for that. So Jay, I've got 3 questions for you that didn't really fit this presentation, but we wanted to answer them anyway. And then I've got a question that we're going to throw over to Sue Ellen. So the first question from the resident, and right after we ask these questions, there's just 4 of them. We're going to move on to hands raised. We'll open up the hands raised and we'll go one by one.
Sure.
So the question, Jay, is will a left-hand turn light be put in to control traffic that is coming from East 28th onto El Camino?
So yeah, so I'm just picturing this in my head. So again, as mentioned in the presentation, El Camino and 28th is a very complicated intersection for a multitude of reasons. Having an arterial there, as well as having the right of way, as well as the maintenance by the state, it is a little bit difficult to make that change. I can tell you that having a protected left turn there is constrained by a couple of factors. When going eastbound, there's actually one through lane or one lane that you have to share movements with for a left turn, a through lane, as well as a right. There is a bus stop there as well. So in order to have a dedicated left turn pocket, we are limited by right of way. But I can tell you, if we are able to make that happen, there are still operational constraints. We know this because we have reached out to Caltrain before in regards to affecting their north and south vehicle movements. Again, so not sure if that answers it correctly 100%, but there are constraints in there and the city has looked into it. And as part of the gap closure project, I want to reiterate, we will be looking to improve crossings at the intersection.
And is there anything a resident can do if they want to kind of expedite anything or have input, or is it best to reach out to the city and let us know how you feel about that intersection, or is there anything else a resident can do?
Yeah, 100%. I think, the city's committed to working with Caltrain. That's just what we do on every single project when we're abutting close to the facility. A lot of times it's great. And for the most time, it's pleasant. But if the community does want to reach out to Caltrain, they can certainly do so. I thought I included a slide in here for Caltrain's information, but maybe it didn't make the final cut or whatnot. But there is a website available, and we can probably share that with the entire group here, where you can fill out a form and you can express your feelings, your concerns about the intersection, and maybe they could go about it their way. But do know the city is vested in making sure that we can make that crossing as usable as possible.
And many of the people on this call might know already how to reach them, but if you go to the Caltrain website, look for District 4, and then they have a comment form there you can give your input. The next question is, why is East 28th the only station exit? Can gates or fences open to Michael's, Curiosity Way, Derby, and 31st for better bike access?
Yeah, good question. So 28th is not the only ingress and egress to the station. You can actually access the station from 25th Avenue. But of course, we've closed it up right now because we are removing the existing at-grade crossing. So when that is done, you can actually access the northern parking lot from 25th Avenue. And if you're coming from 28th Avenue, you can make a right into the northern parking lot, and you can actually exit on 25th Avenue there as well. In regards to, and what was the second part, Kelly?
It was, can there be gates open at Michael's, Curiosity, Derby, and 31st?
Derby, Curiosity. So yeah, so currently in the plans, we do have Derby and Curiosity as a gateway into the southern parking lot. That is already in the plans. Again, we're still in construction. We're not finished yet. So when that is constructed and finished, you will see access to the southern parking lot.
And from 31st as well, once that's done?
31st, there's no vehicle access, but there is pedestrian and bicycle access via the north side of 31st through an ADA compliant ramp.
Okay, wonderful. And the third question I have is very similar to the last one. And I think you've already answered that there. So the next question I have is for one of our panelists, Sue Ellen Atkinson. Sue Ellen, what they want to know is, are there also plans for a cycling route that parallels the train tracks between cities?
Sure, that's also a great question. With regard to the station at hand tonight, the Hillsdale station, access from the south, there are some existing Class 2 striped bike lanes on Pacific that parallel Caltrain, and there are planned projects on Pacific, a buffered bike lane and a standard bike lane that are set to be included in one of the city's paving projects. Expected to be constructed, I believe, next summer. So we'll have continuation of those bike lanes on Pacific. The city was recently awarded or notified the intent to award active transportation program grant funding, regional ATP funding for design and construction of a Class 4 separated bike lane and bike boulevard on Delaware alongside the railroad from 19th Avenue down to that connection at Pacific. And then moving further north, looking at Hayward Park and the downtown Caltrain station, we have numerous projects that parallel the Caltrain route or provide access to Caltrain, and those projects will be implemented as funding is available for them. And all of that information is included in our 2020 Bike Master Plan proposed bike network map, and you can access that on the city's website at cityofsanmateo.org/bike-plan.
Perfect. Thank you, Sue Ellen. I did notice, Jay, I'm just going to get ready to open to hands raised in just a second, but I did notice in the last question that you didn't mention anything about access to the station from Michael's. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry about that. I may have missed that. So at Michael's currently, and I think we're talking about the pedestrian portal underneath there. That's the only area I could think of. Currently, that is private property on Michael's, and that is something that the city will undergo to negotiate, but we currently do not have right of way there to go ahead and have the public go ahead and use that. So that's why you'll see the fence there because that has not been negotiated or begun yet.
Great. Okay, thank you. And I have enabled the raise hand function, and I see a few hands are already up. So we're going to go ahead and open the mic for Richard W. Go ahead and ask your question, Richard.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say this is a great project overall. I've watched it and been involved in it since the beginning. It really is connecting other parts of the city in a way we've never had before. Question about the bike lanes. It seems to me that the best way to proceed, and correct me if I'm wrong, is coming straight down Delaware, not through Saratoga. And also, is there any hope in the future of getting separated bike lanes for El Camino? That's so important because it's such a direct route. I know we'd have to lose a lane, but it might actually slow down traffic and make it safer. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah. Richard, great questions. I'm going to try my best to answer. Again, every time we go into the state facility, I'm not exactly sure what they have up their sleeve. But I can tell you, coming from the Bay Meadow side, there are multiple ways. At Saratoga, there is an existing Class 2 facility there. And then on Delaware, there's also a Class 2 as well as a bike boulevard and a Class 3 right when you pass undergo the south side of Delaware. So really, I don't want to say, which way is the best path, but there are multiple ways that you can access the Class 1 shared use path. Yeah, hopefully that answers. Sue Ellen, maybe there's additional information you could add on to that.
I was going to chime in on the El Camino question. El Camino is such an important facility for the city for many different modes. And as such, in the 2020 Bike Master Plan, we opted to identify it for future study because we really feel that El Camino needs to be looked at holistically and not just segment by segment or mode by mode. So the city also was recently notified that we received funding for an upcoming complete streets plan that will complement the general plan 2040 effort that's ongoing right now. And the complete streets plan will look at comfort and safety for all modes throughout the city on all roadways and look toward a methodology and design opportunities for creating complete streets on our roadways. And I would anticipate that El Camino would be part of that discussion in that project moving forward.
Thank you, Richard, for your question. We're going to move now to the phone number with the last 3 digits, 224. Go ahead and open your mic and ask your question. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I'm Davis. I go to school in the area, and I've been using the Hillsdale station pretty frequently for Caltrain, but haven't used my bike yet. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm wondering who's going to be the primary users of the path. It seems as though if bikers are coming from the southwest portion of the 28th and ECR intersection, and if they're not going to the Caltrain station, they have a disincentive to use the path because they would have to go through multiple crossings, and the share already exists. So they could just use that going forward. So would it primarily be those commuting to the station and not those passing through? And I'm also wondering if there would somehow be an increase in signage for Caltrain as well, because I didn't know there was another exit from the Hillsdale station that went towards the SurveyMonkey buildings, which seem to have very limited signage and often the closed off to people to be able to walk to it. And finally, might there be another pedestrian crossing added sometime in the future under the Hillsdale station to allow people to cross from the ramp to the stairs? Because currently it seems like you have to walk at least 700 meters or so to get to the 23 ECR, Delaware, and 28, which is often a burden to some.
Okay, thank you, Davis.
And I actually wrote that down, Davis. So, but if I forget, I'm gonna have to ask you to repeat yourself, please. So the primary users, really, we designed a class 1 facility for bicyclists as well as pedestrians. And to answer your point, yes, we do acknowledge that the connections going to the class 1 shared use path is not perfect at this moment. But as mentioned, the city is committed to making sure that the access point is as usable as possible. If you are a pedestrian, I can also say you can access the station on the southern side as well. There is a sidewalk there, and you can go ahead and use that. Increased signage, that is something that we're constantly working at as well. I can tell you, as part of the project, there is a lot of signage that has not been installed yet because the project's not completed. But ultimately, when that's finished, we're going to assess to see if all the additional signage and wayfinding is appropriate. And if not, we can adjust accordingly. And then the last one, ped crossings in the future. We do not have a ped crossing in store as a project for the city, and not exactly sure from Caltrain at this point. But I can tell you, if you want to get across 28th Avenue, the 700-meter jog, there is another way around it. You can take the ramp on the south side if you're coming from the south side, go above the platform, and you can exit on the other end on the north side, which to some degree acts very similar to a ped crossing, but not exactly. You do have to go a little bit further. But that is another alternative route if you don't want to go to Delaware as well as El Camino to cross 28th Avenue. Hopefully that answered your question.
Did we get them all, Davis?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for your questions. We're moving now to Dave Clark, and then Lori, and then Madeline, and then Rayanne. Dave, go ahead and open your mic.
Okay, I'm unmuted. 2 things. First of all, I don't understand the need for 4 automobile lanes in there, and everybody I've talked to seems to think that why not just make the outer lanes for bicycle and emergency vehicles? Just and the idea of making a left turn on coming down 28th against oncoming traffic to ride on a sidewalk seems silly to me. Also, the second point. So I don't think anybody can do anything about that. That's just a comment. Is there the second thing, is there a circulation guide or map to show how the parking lots feed one another and how bicycles and cars get from, 25th, and I think the parking lots go all along the track. There's like 900 spaces or something, right? So, so is there any chance, Jay, of just doing the sensible thing and putting in 2 auto lanes? I mean, 28th everywhere else is two lanes. So what we've got here is a speed zone. It's like, yay, 4 lanes. Let's go fast. And the second question is, could we get some visuals on the plans for 25th and 31st so we don't have to go through this process again?
Dave, good questions. Good questions. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of good questions from the audience here today. So for the first question, why 4 lanes? As mentioned, if it's east of Delaware, there actually is a 4-lane roadway, but it does taper sharply after Kine to a 2-way roadway. And that was one of the predominant reasons we mentioned in that presentation that we're going to go ahead and undergo a traffic study to look at the feasibility of installing a Class 2 and a Class 4 facility in this section. And in doing so, I wasn't specific, it will require the removal of a vehicle lane. So that is something that is in the works that city is looking at currently. So that is something I think I mentioned will begin in the spring of 2022. The second question, can we get a visual? Yes, if we have your contact information, I believe Caltrain, if not the city, will be more than happy to send any type of plans you need to go ahead and see 25th Avenue as well as 31st Avenue. So we can definitely follow up with that.
Okay, I have your email. I'll set that right now.
Okay.
Thank you. And if anyone from Caltrain is able to provide any other information about the station access, Lori, or if you have any further information you can share, please go ahead.
If you go to www.caltrain.com/Hillsdale opening, there is a map of the access points when the project's complete.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, and I'm sorry there isn't a chat for me to type it into, but it's www.caltrain.com/Hillsdale opening.
Thank you, Lori. We appreciate that detail. Dave, did you feel all your questions were answered, or did you have any follow-up?
That's good for me.
Okay, thank you so much. Great questions. Madeline, you're next, and then we're going to go to Rayan, and I hope it's Bree. Forgive me if it's Bry. And then David, and then Richard again. So Madeline, go ahead and open your microphone and ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Thanks for the presentation. I live in Burlingame, but like many people in the region and the peninsula, I like to access other cities and the services in there, particularly the Hillsdale Mall and sort of shopping centers and services in the area. And I don't own a car, and I rely on my bike and foot and public transit for my main modes of transportation. But the Hillsdale station has always been, in the surrounding area, has always been really difficult for me to access safely on bike. And therefore I just don't even try, because it's such a hostile area with vehicles traveling really fast, and there's really not protected infrastructure for people on bikes. So I would really encourage there to be a quick build protected bike lane here. I think that's the best option for safety and our environment and sustainability. And there's really not much to lose. I think the protected bike lanes could be wide enough to facilitate emergency vehicles if possible. And potentially, having that sort of design would also encourage lower speeds from drivers, which again has net benefits for everyone on the road. And so I would like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. Jay, did you have any comment about that, or anything that anything Madeline could do to take further action on that, or get engaged with that? Is there anything else any insight you want to provide to Madeline?
Not in particular. I would just say, we have a couple of projects, as mentioned earlier, that we're going to be starting very soon. Gap closure being one, which is not exactly on this corridor, but it's pretty close, and it does touch on the connection, so that's important. So feel free to reach out to the city as we progress through the design of that. And when we undergo our traffic study in spring of 2022, that will ultimately determine how we're going to go ahead and improve the bicycle infrastructure in this corridor. So stay in tune, Madeline. You have my email. Feel free to give me a ring as well. I think my phone number is there. If it's not, email me and we could talk later.
So Jay, let's forward on to the next slide with our contact information. So I think that's a great idea. Thank you, Madeline. We're going to move on to the next panelist, Rayan, then Bree, forgive me, then David, then Richard, and then Lori Watnuka. You have your hand up, so we are going to open your mic eventually. So go ahead, Rayan, your microphone is open, and go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, team. Hi, everyone. I wanted to thank you for the work that you are doing. I'm actually on site at the Caltrain station right now. I decided to bike here to give my comment, and kind of, while I'm making my comment and asking my questions, kind of just get a feel for what is happening at the station right now and maybe translate that into this panel right now.
Wonderful.
So a couple
about it.
Yeah. So a little on site, but essentially what I've seen in the 30 minutes I've been here is a variety of conflicts ensuing due to the existing design of the roadway. And I understand that there is plans. Thank you for notifying us of the plans at this session. It's been very informative to do a study. But I want to recognize that that study might not necessarily result in a reform. I mean, I certainly hope that it does, and it results in class 4 protected bike lanes. But there are issues that exist now, in between now and when the study will be complete, let alone implementation of whatever the study comes up with. And I feel like in order to make this an accessible, safe station to bike and walk to and take transit to, we need to do something now in the interim while this study is happening. So I've seen a lot of cyclists right now, like when they come eastbound on 28th Avenue, they are not crossing 28th to get to the shared use path that is on the north side, because it's just for this section of underpass. And so I feel like there needs to be something done about ensuring the safety of bicyclists who continue taking the lane down or take the sidewalk on the south side. Because what I see happening is a lot of bikes are using the sidewalk, and you know how it narrows as it gets to that building where the right-of-way takes up space that could have been sidewalk. They have to come into conflict with cars, essentially. I mean, sorry, with pedestrians, or they have to take the shared lane and go with cars. And cars right now, I'm eyeballing it, they're traveling anywhere between 30 and 40 miles per hour on this underpass. They're going fast. There's also a bicyclist right now taking the sidewalk too. They're going the other direction as well. So there are a lot of bicyclists using these sidewalks in conflict with pedestrians right now. Great. And there's a lot of extra road space. And so my question is, sorry, that was a little long-winded. My question is, I understand that a study must be done when taking a lane of the road for a permanent change. Do we need to do a study in order to institute a quick build protected bike lane on this corridor right now, between now and whenever we get a final implementation? Or can we immediately or very soon institute some kind of protected bike lane pilot and reassess with the traffic study that we're planning to do how that's going, because then we'll actually be able to see how it is that the roadway network is behaving with this protected bike lane pilot being put in.
Okay, thank you, Ram. I appreciate that, and I'm glad that you're right there on the street. I know we went through a little bit of a timeline. Jay, do you want to speak to Ram? If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to mute because there's got a little bit of feedback there. So you can, yeah, perfect, thank you. Jay, can you go ahead and answer his question about timeline and when we hope to institute the first pieces?
Yeah, definitely. So good question there. In regards to the timeline, in order for us, and I mentioned this earlier in a couple of slides, 28th Avenue is a very complicated in regards to jurisdiction and what we can do there, because it does front El Camino, and because they do ultimately have the right-of-way there at that intersection. They maintain the traffic signals as well. We want to take caution and be sure to understand the operational impacts when we're making a lane reduction, because there are existing queuing issues that we have acknowledged. And as part of the 25th Avenue grade separation project, we actually had improvements to try to mitigate those as well. So those are issues that we are aware of currently. Now, to your point about the traffic study is really just to give us more data. Ultimately, when we make the decision, it is not purely based off one factor or another. I think it's quite clear that we're designing for all modes moving forward. And the bike master plan and the commitment that we're putting in 28th Avenue alone, as well as other projects that Sue Ellen have mentioned. And if you attended the other bicycle meetings moving forward, we are really dedicated to make sure that all modes of travel are being looked into. So to answer your question, right now, unfortunately, we cannot just implement even a pilot project because we do understand the operational impacts. And that study at spring of 2022, we're going to undergo that and have more data. And then we're going to reevaluate to see how we proceed forward. So again, great questions. I totally understand your perspective, but no, we're committed to making it a better facility.
So
we've got a few other questions, Brian, that are a few other people piling up wanting to ask questions. So let's get to those other questions and we'll come back to you if you don't mind. I will leave your microphone open, but if you don't mind muting so we can answer these other questions and we'll come back to you. Thanks, Brian. Bree, is it Bree or Bri? I apologize if I got that wrong. Go ahead and open your microphone and ask your question.
Okay, thanks. It's Bri. Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for your commitment to making this pedestrian friendly passageway. I'm one of those moms with the double stroller who takes up a large portion of the sidewalk. Yes. And I don't know if you've walked with young children recently or anyone with a double stroller. It's not particularly fast unless you're running. And so my concern is the conflict with the pedestrians and the bikes. I would like to see that class 4 bike lane built because I think we're expecting a lot of people to be sharing that sidewalk. And even though it's going to be wide, it's not wide enough to be passing people. So we're talking about people in their 60s walking, young children on their little Strider bikes walking, hopefully, or riding, people on scooters. And we're asking a lot of individuals to be shoved on to a small section. And we're going to see those bikes trying to pass slow walkers or slow children. And that's going to create a lot of conflict. And like you guys already said, there's that whole driveway into the parking lot problem where we're going to see at high rush hour times, that's just going to get super congested. And so we're going to have cars trying to get into the roadway and then all these bikers, walkers, all in this small section. And my concern mostly is that we're asking too many individuals to share a small section of sidewalk. And I just want to remind everyone what's around that. We have the mall. So we have like a bunch of office workers who are going to go walk across this or take this underpass to go to the mall for lunch. Hopefully, that's what we're hoping. And then we have a bunch of high schoolers who are hoping to ride their bikes to school, right? And we have Paddock Park and everyone in Bay Meadows who have there's a lot of young families there. And they're gonna wanna go to the mall and hopefully there'll be family-friendly services at the mall that we'll want them to use. Yes. And we'll want them to walk there. And so we really need to make this pedestrian friendly, not just car friendly. And like a lot of the other commenters stated that these cars are just driving so fast. 25 miles per hour is pretty fast as is, but 40 miles per hour is far too fast. And if it stays a double lane road or 4 lane, we're just going to see those high speeds. So I just really hope to emphasize the need to give pedestrians more space and bikers more space and not just put the needs of cars in front of everybody else, especially if we want to make us a Vision Zero city. Thank you.
Right. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Duly noted. And we have a good team here, and we're going to do our best. I think the audience know our commitment, and appreciate the comment.
Thank you, Bri. Moving on now to David. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for putting this together. It's been a great conversation so far. My question is, I'd like to better understand what we're hoping to learn from the traffic study specifically, and what city staff sees as possible outcomes from that. And then the second question is the traffic study being scheduled for spring of 2022. That's not that far away, but what's stopping us from pulling that in to get those learnings earlier?
Great questions. Thank you, David.
Great questions. I will start with the latter, David. So I would go with why spring of 2022. We underwent for the past, I don't know, 16 months a pandemic, and our traffic engineering department, as well as transportation planning, we have noticed traffic patterns to be significantly different. We don't expect this to be the norm, but we do want to wait until all 3 grade separations are completed. So at 25th, 28th is open, and then 31st to be completed for vehicle traffic to normalize, and to hopefully have vehicle traffic distribute a little bit more, because right now it is a little focused on 28th. So to see the real world conditions of what the ultimate condition will look like, give it a couple months, and then we can go ahead and evaluate and see that as a condition, and have some solid grounds to stand on when we do our traffic study. The second question is, what are we trying to see? Ultimately, we're trying to see the impacts and where the queuing will come from. Having that data is really instrumental to us. Again, it's not even a conversation starter with Caltrans if we're trying to make modifications to the intersection if we don't have that data available. Now, again, there are multiple ways that we could go about tackling this, because it comes to priority of mode. And again, from the city's perspective, we have a perspective, but Caltrans, we got to be able to understand the perspective. But really what data we're trying to get is, we want to know what the operational impact is to the intersection, because we foreshadow that is what Caltrans is going to want. So it won't even be a conversation starter if we don't have the data readily available, and then we can present that to Caltrans. So again, great questions, really good questions.
Thank you, David. Did you feel that all your questions were answered?
Yeah, I think that's helpful to better understand it. It just weighing the queuing concern against safety seems like a tough 2 things to put against each other, but I understand that there's a process to these things, and you've brought up many times that Caltrans is a big part of the process. So I appreciate the details.
You're welcome.
Thank you, David. I've got Richard and Rayanne have both come back for second questions, but I'm going to go ahead to the next 3 who haven't asked a question yet, if you don't mind, Richard and Rayanne. Kelly, I'm going to open your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Kelly Moran from the Bay Meadows neighborhood. I'm not sure why it's showing my picture because my camera's on, but this is a very weird meeting.
It's a great picture.
I love it, Kelly.
Anyway, I appreciate that you're having the dialogue, and I appreciate the city's new emphasis on bicycles. I think that's really important. I really think you're making a tremendous mistake here. And I got to tell you, I am really, really scared for the lives of people in my neighborhood. And I know that sounds really extreme, but I cross through that area several times a week. And I have almost without fail had to jump into the street to avoid either being in conflict with a stroller, a child on a bike. The hazards will only increase with the design that you put together is incredibly dangerous. I've experienced the similar tunnel outcoming in Palo Alto with the bikes going by, and I was actually hit by a bike. I've had troubles manipulating bikes through those areas. I still think there's a tremendous danger with the cars, and the hazard is now an immediate. Almost all of the activity to and from the area by pedestrians is on the south sidewalk that, as you mentioned, is only a few feet wide. Although you tell us in the future there will be other crossings, none of those are open at this time. So everyone going anywhere in this area is on the south sidewalk. It is just friggin' scary. And I know that I just want to say, I know that the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition actually teaches people how to file a notice of a hazardous condition with the city. And I think that this area is ripe for that filing at this immediate point. And that is far more important than all of these other things we're talking about cars. We've got all these other car-friendly streets. This is the only one that is not. And this is a transit-oriented development. I've watched all kinds of children and family. They're all riding on the street, on the sidewalk. The place is a complete dangerous mess. So I want you to consider yourselves warned about this and beg you to please protect the lives of my neighborhood. Please protect the lives of citizens of San Mateo and all the people who go to and from this area who come from throughout the peninsula. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly. We always appreciate your passion, appreciate that. And we're going to move on to the next question, Adam and then Michael, and then we're going to come back to Richard W. and Rayanne. Adam, go ahead, and your microphone is open. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much, staff, for this presentation, the city and Caltrain, and thanks very much to Public Works for looking into adding onto this Class 1 with the study for Class 2 and Class 4 lanes. As many commenters have already noted pretty thoroughly, I would echo comments that are to the effect of, I don't believe this Class 1 is the real solution for cyclists. I think it's not going to be easy to share really with any pedestrians, anyone of any sort on that in that area at the time. And of course, we want people to be in that area taking the train. That is the whole point. So I'm very much looking forward ahead to the study for Class 2, Class 4 lanes. I'm very much hoping that we determine from that study that indeed we should go ahead with Class 4 lanes, and would just like to ask, based on the timeline slide that Jay shared earlier, I noticed that it said spring 2022, 25th and 28th, and just wanted to ask if there were similar considerations being made on 25th as well, and whether both will be studied at the same time, or whether 25th factors into this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, good question, Adam. So that is correct. When we do the study, it is not just at 28th. We are also going to study 25th Avenue, because we do have a Class 2, I believe, in Sue Ellen, correct me if I'm wrong, proposed as part of the 2020 Bicycle Master Plan on that corridor. And we're going to go ahead and do the study at the same time, because in order to do that, we anticipate lane reductions will be needed as well. So yes, to answer that, we are going to look at both roadways, 25th as well as 28th. Even though they are separate, we are doing both of those studies at once. All right. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. We're going to move on to the next first question. Oh, we have a few more first questions coming in, and we're going to go back to the second questioners after that. So our next question is going to be from Michael, and then we're going to go to Sandhya and then Gil. So Michael, go ahead and open your microphone and ask away.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I want to add my voice to the comments of Rayanne, Bree, Kelly, and Adam about the concerns for the safety of people and bicycles being on the same path. The only time in my life I've been knocked to the ground by a vehicle was when I was floored by a cyclist in an exact same environment in Toronto. I wasn't hurt, fortunately, but when I saw that design, it brought back the whole concern. I spent a lot of time on the streets, and I have to say that for the most part, cyclists aren't well educated on etiquette of passing pedestrians, and I'm very concerned, and I would ask that the city consider some way of defining specific spaces in that north side passage where bicycles should be and where people should be, and not commingle them, because I think that would be incredibly dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jay, did you want to speak to any of that? Anything that Michael just said?
I think his concerns, I've noted, Ryan as well as Kelly, in regards to separating and having the sidewalk, I'm going to call it, it will be a Class 1 use facility, but we currently don't have enough right of way to have bicyclists travel on both directions on one end, as well as pedestrians on the other. The way we've followed our guidance in regards to FHWA, looked at how NACDO does it, as well as the Caltrain's recommended bulletin. That is the route our designers have chose. But again, duly noted, we just don't have the right of way for that. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to move on to Sandia. Go ahead and open your mic. Sandia, do you want to tell us who you are and which group you're with?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandhya and I'm with Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. I'd like to thank Caltrain and City of San Mateo for putting this together. I know this was a long pending presentation and we are really looking forward to having this community meeting. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
The one question or concern I had was that like given this stretch has now 4 lanes instead of 2, and we're already seeing a lot of traffic and high-speed traffic. When the traffic study happens later in spring 2022, it is very possible that the traffic study shows the need for having 4 lanes and not having 2 lanes. But at that time, would you be considering all the community input that you're getting today with respect to having some kind of facility for bikes on either sides of the road? Or is it going to be based completely on number of vehicles and their PCUs?
Sonia, good question. I think this is very similar to, if I'm reading my notes correctly, what David had to say earlier. But to echo the comments, when we look at the traffic study, really, it is not an end-all be-all. We are looking to gather data to make an informed decision. And whatever the scenario is, if there is queuing, if there isn't, we're going to consider all modes into the factor. This is not, again, we mentioned this multiple times, and I think even with the city, with city council making bicycle infrastructure a priority A within the city, I think it really does demonstrate that moving forward and decision making is not purely just based off one mode, and we're going to look at multiple modes. So to your point, yes, we are going to analyze vehicle operations, but we are definitely going to consider community input as well as safety and other modes and equity as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Satya. Happy to have you here, and thank you for all of your help in advance of this meeting. The first question we have is Gil. Lori Watanuki, I saw your hand up earlier. Was that a technical issue, or do you have a question? If you do, put your hand up, and we will definitely make sure that you get a chance to ask us a question. Yes, I see it up. Okay, you're going to come after Gil. Okay, so Gil, go ahead and open your mic and ask your question.
Hey guys, so thank you for doing this. My name is Gil. I live in the neighborhood.
Hi, Gil.
Thank you. And so totally appreciate the effort. And I imagine a lot of you guys are the messengers here and not the people who came up with these plans and possibly inherited them from other people. But I totally agree with basically everything the commentators have said so far, right? Like the plans right now are what's built so far is disappointing. The plans seem not particularly effective, and the timeline on them makes it extra scary and dangerous. But that said, it sounds like there is no willingness or ability to do anything about it right now on 28th. I am curious to know how we got into this situation and whether it's a city issue or Caltrain or Caltrans, but I guess that's a discussion that maybe is better saved for another time over drinks with somebody. So I guess for now, like the question is like, for me is, is there anything that can be done about 25th and 31st? That link that was shared earlier in the meeting on the Caltrain site has a map, but it's not very informative about what's actually going to be done there. So, given that the concrete isn't that dry yet on the 25th and 31st, can we dive into those? Can we do anything to make those any better? Or do we have to are we supposed to be getting involved in the planning for like the next grade separations, downtown San Mateo, or whatever's coming next? Anyway, thanks. That's it.
Thank you, Gil.
I think to that question, the comment that I got, Gil, I think 25th Avenue, so we're not quite open yet. If you're talking about when that is opening, that should be open sometime in August, as well as 31st Avenue. As mentioned earlier, 25th Avenue, we do have a future Class 2 facility planned there. And in spring of 2022, we're going to go ahead and undergo a feasibility study to see whether we can install that or what it would take to go ahead and install that. We're going to do that in conjunction with 28th Avenue. 31st, I might have to rely on Sue Ellen, our principal transportation planner, because I don't recall off the top of my head if there is a bicycle facility planned for 31st Avenue.
Hey, thanks, Jay. In our proposed network map, that's identified as a future bicycle boulevard and also identified for future study, given the roadway configuration at that location.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gil. I appreciate that. Did that answer all the questions, or did I hear an invitation to come up for drinks? Did I still hear that? Or, did that answer all your questions?
Sorry, drinks are still on offer. Yes, and I mean, yes, sort of. You answered them in government speak, but it sounds like no, like nothing is planned for 31st, at least right now. So it'll open with car focus.
Sue Ellen, did you want to respond to that?
Sure. As Jay mentioned, the Class 2 bike lanes that are proposed at 25th Avenue do require a reduction in lanes. So we have to have that traffic study available, which is coming in the spring. And the project to install those Class 2 lanes was not included in the 25th Avenue grade separation project, nor were improvements at 31st. So those will come at a later time.
All right, thank you, Gil. We're gonna move on to the other hands raised, and I'm gonna find Lori Watnuki down here. Lori, your microphone's open if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Kelly, for circling back.
Nope.
I wanted to just share my thoughts on, and I do agree with the previous speakers on this shared use between the pedestrians and the bicyclists. I am really concerned about that, and it seems like it's a very narrow space if they're like 5 feet in each direction. And the other issue is that ramp and the bicyclists coming down on the ramp into this area. Has there been any thought about mirrors being placed in that area so that there's more safety for the pedestrians? So there aren't as many conflicts, and there could be some visibility issues as well. And I think that's something that might be considered. But those are my concerns regarding the safety issue in this shared use situation between the bicyclists and the pedestrians in this narrow space. Because San Mateo is quite car centric. And I think we need to kind of focus more on the pedestrians and the bicyclists. But thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lori. Jay, any comment you wanted to make on Lori's comment? I hear them as just comments, and I do want to get on to the last 3 questions. And I think that, we have a new question from Drew. Drew, I'm going to open your mic quickly and go ahead and ask your question. You just have to open your mic, Drew.
Yes, had some technical things. The button wasn't working. So thank you. A couple things, a little bit of feedback quick and a couple questions. So in the current design, the railing, the eastbound 28th on that side where the shared path is going to be. I've come out of that parking lot in a vehicle when I've been driving around and just checking things, and that's a blind spot. It creates a blind spot. The railing needs to be, something with the railing just needs to be dealt with, opened up. That because I couldn't see until I got basically out into the path itself. So I just recommend taking a look at about the railing. It's a pedestrian railing or something right there. The building's under construction on that
on
corner.
On the Caltrain property, or off of it?
It's on the side. It's where the shared path is going to be on the north side of the street. The building and the corner is under construction. right now. And there's a railing on top of this like 2-foot high retaining wall. And so it does, if there's some little kid or someone's walking or something, I could not see people because the railing was preventing me from seeing if someone's right next to the wall.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then I'll +1 on the mirrors that Lori Wapniuki just talked about. Like, what about maybe some mirrors around these entrances that are coming out to these paths? And then kind of a question, this is more the question part, was the sidewalk that gets narrow from like 10 feet to 5 feet it's on the south side, but on the east of the track area. So in a discussion earlier, a month or two ago, about why there's 8-foot fences on the west side that don't need to be there, it got brought up, well, there's pedestrians on the other side of this little wall. That's why there's just this short railing. So why couldn't we work with the building there on the corner and the Bay Meadows Neighborhood Association as well to essentially split the sidewalk? Like, when I say it's not split the current one, it would essentially make widen the sidewalk, but there's this railing. You don't have to rip out the retaining wall, but like PEDs could be on the upper part and then transition down when it gets right to the station with the ramp. And then bikes could be on the existing narrow sidewalk part. So in a sense, bikes, you wouldn't have to have a shared path in both directions. On the north side, you could have bike stuff on the south side. And I'm not saying, it's more really about the PED, because that sidewalk is narrow, and why not work with the owners? Because I'm assuming they're going to pour concrete or do something. That's why the railing was put in. And then we could use that as general public between the station and Bay Meadows. That's on the south side. And then, so that's kind of a question stuff. And then the other thing.
Very, very specific. Thank you. And yes, hopefully having the audience is San Matean, so they know exactly what it is you're talking about. But I think Jay and Caltrain, if there's anything Caltrain wants to provide. But Jay, did you want to answer or speak to his suggestion there?
Sure, for sure. Drew, I actually ran out of space on my notebook. No, I'm just kidding. No, duly noted. I heard your concern there, and I think we spoke about this as well. I don't know about all the specifics going back to, this project started really in 2005, but the section you're pertaining to about the retaining wall, the city does not have right of way. I don't know exactly what type of engagement were discussed in the past to acquire that land. But I can tell you that that land is being used by the developer as one of the corridors that they've designated for their employees. So that's why there's that railing there. Again, it's their right of way, it's their property. And there is, not a lot we can do unless we acquire it, but unfortunately the building is built there. So it would be a tough path to travel if we're moving backwards in regards to trying to widen that property that's not ours.
It's not trying to widen the existing property. It's just saying the concrete that would be along the railing, general public could use, and then there's just an opening at the station entrance. And it's just the sidewalk is a split level sidewalk. One part it's on the road grade, the other part is on the building grade. And we don't have to buy the land. We just work it out with the building. Hey, you're right next to the Caltrain station. You get a great promo being there, and we just need like 5 feet to share.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Jay, anything further you want to say on that? I mean, I don't want to go back and forth on this one particular item, but any final comments you want to make before we move on to the next question?
Nothing in particular. Maybe I'm not understanding it. Maybe we could have a conversation later, Drew. I think I know how to, contact you, and you know how to contact me. We could probably bring this offline, maybe to understand the situation a little bit better.
Yeah, let's talk more about that offline. Thank you, Drew. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going back to the second questions again. And Richard, Rayanne, and Kelly, we really appreciate your patience as we let everyone else ask their first question. Richard, I'm going to open your microphone again. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I've got a couple of things that I failed to bring up the first time.
Sure.
I appreciate you letting me come a second time. As far as the Michael's property with the portal to Caltrain, that's very important for a couple of reasons. One, you have the below market rate housing that's right there. It really need easy access to the train station. But more importantly, even though Michael's had access to Station Park Green and it was part of the plan, they decided to move because they thought it was a preferable location. There's a lot of pushback on it because that area is cited for below market rate housing or for housing in the general plan around the station. And there's a term called in planning called warehousing. And that's what was applied to this. They had to actually make some design changes in the building to be able to put it there as a business. They opened some doors on the front, put a cafeteria in.
And there's a mid-pen housing complex there already. Is that
right? That's when I was at below market rate housing I was referring to.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask if there are any plans to in the future not only obtain that portal but make this idea sooner rather than later of housing going in that location. Number one, and number two, just a statement.
Sure.
I think just generally, the mixing of different modes of transportation is dangerous. Where I live, which is ways away from Bay Meadows, I've been forced off into the street several times, especially during the pandemic with families doing something I can do safely, like biking, riding two abreast on the sidewalk. I've been forced off of the bridge over the lagoon, Mariners Lagoon, by a family that were riding their bikes on the sidewalk because they were afraid, and somewhat rightfully so, afraid to ride their bike in the bike lanes on a narrow stretch of road. I'm sympathetic, but also I don't like getting thrown into traffic either. But I understand those concerns, and in some ways, hopefully we can remedy them. But anyway, it's a citywide problem.
Yes, and I've actually ridden those bike lanes over near you. And if your house is any indication if your picture is any indication of where you are, I've ridden those bike lanes and I've enjoyed them. But
the bike lanes are actually wide on Mariners Island, but a lot of people still want to ride them.
I did want to say that the housing topic is probably a little bit off topic for this meeting. So, but we can follow up with you in an offline. And yeah, I think we'd like to move on to the next questions if you don't mind.
I brought it up because of the portal.
Right. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate it. And thanks for being patient and waiting to come back again. Rayanne, we're going to open your microphone again and go ahead and ask your question. Thanks for your patience.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for letting me go again as well.
No problem.
So I'm still at the station. I just wanted to bring up something else I noticed, which is the U-turns being made at the underpass. I think something needs to be done about that. So essentially what's happening right now, I've seen it happen 2 times while I've been waiting here. Essentially cars, because they don't want to go up to the intersection, as they pull out of the parking lot, they turn right and proceed down the underpass. But then as soon as they get away from that concrete median that blocks them, they make a U-turn. The only way that they can make the U-turn is because there's physically enough space for them to do so. There's 4 lanes. It's wide enough for them to do so. So I think we need to acknowledge that the design as exists is allowing for these unsafe maneuvers to happen due to the width of the road, in addition to inducing demand and in addition, like inducing driving, which is bad because we have goals to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and we want to reduce traffic violence on our roads. And also it makes cars go faster. So I wanted to point that out, like we have the ability, there's nothing legal, no legal statute that says we can't pilot a bike lane. Like we can do it. We're just choosing not to because we're prioritizing the movement of cars and the impact to an intersection on El Camino, as opposed to prioritizing the safety of bicyclists in this case. And this is going to be a year that we will have to deal with this. So I'm truly worried for potential like issues that could happen. I'm worried that someone will get hit, and so I'm concerned about that. I just wanted to say that. I also wanted to say I agree with Richard about the Michaels parking lot. I think maybe just like Drew suggested, negotiating with the property owner for that extra sidewalk, so we can maybe widen the sidewalk a bit, or like have another sidewalk pedestrians can use. Maybe we can negotiate with the property owner, allow us to open that fence, because not only do we get to some housing there, but we also get to Hillsdale Shopping Center, which is this enormous development that we could have a lot of people walk to. So I would hope that we could, I hope that we could work with that. My question was, can we have bike ramps on the stairs? So essentially, right now, bikes, they're coming east on 28th. They're coming down. Sorry, the train is here. They're coming east. They're coming down on 28th. Sorry. So the trains are coming east. I mean, the bikes are coming east on 28th. And what they're doing on the sidewalk is they might cross to go up the ramp. So they might jaywalk across the 4 lanes, which is dangerous, not only because it's not 2 lanes, it's 4, but also because, you know, they're crossing 40-mile-per-hour traffic. But if we installed like a bike ramp to go up the stairs, like just so you could put your bike up it, that way they won't be incentivized to cross, which might be useful. And I had another question. There's a lot of
good question. Hold on 1 second, Rayanne. If you can hold on 1 second, I want to see if anyone from Caltrain wants to answer that question about the ramp. And we'll see if they have. I'm not sure if that's something that the city could answer. Am I muting? Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Robert or Andy want to take that question about the actual ramps on the Caltrain station.
Sorry, Kelly, I think he means like channels that go along the stairs.
Yes, that's what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, if Robert, Andy want to take that one.
So, Rayanne, I really appreciate your question regarding the adding a bike channel along the stairs. I think we would need to do that in conjunction with the work that the city is doing. If we're trying to build a bike facility on one side and then do another improvement on the other side, we'd want to make sure that we're coordinated in that approach. But I've done a lot of those types of facilities, and I think it's something we should really take a good hard look at, but we'd want to do it in coordination with our partners at the city to make sure that it's an integrated approach. But I really appreciate you bringing that forward for something for us to look at. So thank you.
Okay, and Rayanne, we've got a few more people with questions. Want to get to them. If you don't mind, just hold on. We'll come back to you. And we're going to go ahead and go back to Kelly. Kelly, you've got your hand up again. So I'm going to open your microphone and go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. First, I just want to state for the record that in addition to the examples I provided where I've had to leap into the street to avoid bicycles, to get around strollers coming towards me on the sidewalk, taking up the full width of the south sidewalk, leaping into traffic has happened to me about a third of the time. I walk this several times a week. In addition, I think you heard hazardous conditions from several other commenters that were very specific. So I'll just state for the record that a dangerous condition does exist because of the presence of latent hazards associated with the normal use of the facility now. And we're trying very hard to communicate this to you. I'm very concerned that you're not listening. I apologize for becoming emotional about the safety of the children and families that I know so well. But I think this is an extremely serious thing and not one to be put off a year or 2 years and make some decision later. So I am going to request that the city examine things it could do immediately. And 2 things I'd like to ask you to please respond to. The first one would be to immediately open additional access to the station. Right now, the only access on the south side of the station is the sidewalk that is 1 stroller wide. And that's the one where all these conflicts are occurring. So the question is, could the city immediately, like in the next week or 2, create at least 1 opening at Curiosity or the Derby and Landing on our neighborhood? That would relieve some of the pressure on that sidewalk and increase the safety. The second request would be whether the city could use a quick build to just in the narrow part of the sidewalk, so not by El Camino, therefore not encountering Caltrans, provide access for either bicycles or pedestrians into the rightmost lane as a means of keeping people from having to jump into ongoing traffic, which is extremely light in that area. So those are my 2 requests. And just to make sure that you understand the urgency of this, I'm sure there are grounds for filing of a notice of dangerous condition here. The future ramp would also justify that kind of filing.
Thank you, Kelly. We appreciate it. We do hear you. That's why we're having this meeting. Jay, can you talk a little bit about why the study is so important and the timeline of that? I think it bears repeating. Thank you, Kelly.
No.
Thank you. Yeah, so Kelly, good question. To tackle your first question immediately in terms of station access, as per the 25th Avenue grade separation project, there will be access on Curiosity that you can access the southern parking lot. And ultimately, there will also be access on Derby. The Curiosity access will be available as soon as the project's complete. So in the next couple of months, we're anticipating a completion in September. So that access should be open shortly after that. In terms of the quick build, it really does, it's all predicated off of the traffic study, as we mentioned. We really want to understand the impacts that we're going to be implementing into that whole entire corridor if we're reducing a lane. But again, as duly noted, we are trying to do this as quick as we can. And the study's already in place in regards to having a plan. And once we undergo that, we will have more data. So again, Kelly, thank you for the question.
And we do hear you. Lori, you've got your hand up again. And go ahead.
Kelly,
Azalea wants
yes.
to comment. Go ahead, Azalea.
Hi, thank you, Azalea Mitch. I would like, thank you very much, Juan, for being here. As you can see, I think the team tried to do really their best to walk you through the improvements. This has been a project that has been in the planning phase for a long time, right? The Caltrain station is quite an asset, and we have been in the process of implementing a lot of the bicycle master plan improvements that were adopted in 2020. That's not to say, right, that everything is perfect, and we do hear you. So that's why we are having this meeting. There were things that Jay presented that we have included, like the issue with the driveway, trying to make sure that the signage is there, that the wayfinding is there. We do have gaps. We have gaps, and we have been very transparent here in letting you know that we do need further studies. And the signage that we have presented to you is meant to address and acknowledge, some of the conflicts. I will say that shared paths are common, and that's not to say that there aren't, that conflicts are eliminated, but they are common, and we want people to access the facility in a safe manner. So we have been taking a lot of notes about your comments, and also please note that this project is yet to be completed. So the station did open, but we still have work to do, and we're in the process of finalizing the design. So if I think there's one more question, but I just wanted to point out that a lot of effort has been put into organizing this meeting, putting this presentation together, and really soliciting input that we received a few months ago and incorporating that into the proposed design. So Kelly, if you can get to the next question, that would be great.
Sure, you bet. Thank you, Azalea, for that. Lori, your microphone is open, and I see, Drew, that you put your hand up again. We'll come to you in just a minute. Lori, go ahead and ask your question. If you intended to have your hand up, your microphone is open, Lori. If you didn't, I'm going to move on to Drew. Okay, it sounds like you didn't intend to do that. And I'm going to go to Drew. You have a follow-up question, and at this hour, I think we're at 7:31. I do want to encourage you, if you have any other questions, any other members of the audience have a new question or something else you'd like to share with us, please raise your hand. We've got Drew with his hand up, and then we'll come back to Rayan to finish it out unless anyone else has a question. Drew, your microphone is open.
Hello again, thanks. Two things. One, I was wondering with this study that's going to be happening next spring and talking about the bike lanes, and I've heard a lot about taking out a car lane for the bike lane, and I'm not against this by asking this question by any means. So I want to just state that, but I'll hear things through the grapevine from other people. Will the study include potentially, though, having like turn lanes into and out of the parking lots? So I think there's a way to do that with bike lanes through some kind of dash markings, but that that there's not queuing issues because of turning in or out of the kind of parking lot back into, say, a single main lane. So I'm just wondering if the studies is going to include that kind of analysis. And then the other thing is, I definitely hear a lot of concern about the shared path, but I support a lot of concerns, but I'm also struggling a little bit with it because isn't the Bay Trail a shared path? I mean, I've biked it. I've had to get around pedestrians, joggers, or next to the path. So I'm like, is there something different with the Bay Trail as a shared path versus this? I know some of it's certainly different. It's wide open versus narrow, but yeah, it's just, that's more of a comment. Not against a lot of the bike things that are being said, but I'm just, yeah. Anyway, so my question was the study. That's my main point. Thank you.
The question about the study. Okay, thank you, Drew. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. And I'll make sure to have a clean sheet of paper so I remember. Pertaining to the study, we haven't defined the scope yet, but turning movements will definitely be one of the metrics that we're going to be looking at, whether it be optimizing specific signals. We're going to look at ways to improve operations at signals, adding specific phases, bicyclist phase, lead pedestrian intervals. All of that is on the table, but again, we haven't developed the scope yet, but turning movements will be essential in the study.
Great, and it looks like Rayan's got his hand up again. We're going to come back to you, Rayan. We're hoping that you've got something that you'd like to ask that maybe is new. And we do want to remind everyone that we've got all of our contacts of all the panelists and Jay up on the screen right now. We encourage you to reach out to us if there's a specific question you want to ask. We're dwindling down. We're kind of losing our audience a little bit. So Rayan, your microphone is open, and ask whatever new question that you might have as we close out this meeting.
All right, thank you. This is, I promise, my last one. Well, it's like two mini questions. One is a new question about data, and another is a question about the study. So sure. My question is, thank you. My question is there any data at the moment that illustrates the existing conditions on 28th Avenue? My reason I'm asking that is because I've been here and there's been little to no car traffic or big level of service issues that I could see. That's my one question. My other question is, will the traffic study also consider crosswalks? Because one major issue I see is jaywalking between the parking lots, and jaywalking may very well be legal starting next year perhaps, but that doesn't mean that the crossing between the parking lots is safe or ADA accessible. So data question about the queues that we are seeing currently on 28th Avenue that a quick build pilot might impact, and also will it be studied crosswalk at the mid block? Thank you.
Thank you, Rayan.
All right, Rayan, good questions there. I got them both here. So for the first one, in regards to existing data, it is difficult on 28th to get existing data, and that's part of why we want to do the traffic study, because prior to 28th, it wasn't a through road. So any numbers that you're throwing on there anyways would be theoretical. Our perspective in doing the traffic analysis is we really want to understand the real condition out there. So 28th not being a gray separated roadway prior, there is no good existing data. So question number two, crosswalks, that will be analyzed as part of the traffic study. Again, when we're analyzing traffic study, we're going to look for all modes. Of course, we're going to look for operations because we know our friends at Caltrain would want to see that. But as part of the decision-making process, we are going to look at pedestrian volumes, bicycle volumes, projections, the whole gamut. So hopefully that answers your question.
It's what happens when we have a brand new road in the city. Lori, I don't know if it's a technical issue, if you're meant to have your hand up, but your microphone is open. And it might be a technical issue. We've had this happen before with Lori. So Lori, your hand is up, but I'm assuming it's a technical issue. So
it's a technical issue.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lori.
All right, and that concludes all the questions that we have for tonight. Again, we thank everyone for taking the time out of their day. We know most everyone spends their days on Zoom, so we appreciate this. We want to again thank the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, our partners at Caltrain. And we will be posting this meeting on the project web pages at Caltrain and also here at the City of San Mateo. And we thank everyone for joining us tonight. And we wish you well, and we say good night. Thank you, everyone.